Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
And so, the answer to the question, who was refusing the meeting, was Zelensky. That you believe should take place, and Ambassador Volker believes should take place, and everybody believes should take place. The only question was when. Who was the one standing in the way of that meeting? Who was the one refusing to take that meeting? There's only one answer to that question, and it's Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States. So who was holding up the military assistance? Was it you, Ambassador Sondland? No, it wasn't. Was it Ambassador Volker? No. Was it Ambassador Taylor? No. Was it Deputy Secretary Kent? No. Was it Secretary of State Pompeo? No. Who had the decision to release the aid? It was one person, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. Now, my colleagues seem to think unless the President says the magic words, I hereby bribe the Ukrainians, that there's no evidence of bribery or other high crimes or misdemeanors. But let's look to the best evidence of what's in the President's head. What's his intent? What's the reason behind the hold on the meeting and on the aid? Let's look at what the President has to say. Let's look at what's undisputed about what the President has to say. And you know how we know what the President has to say? Not because what you have represented or others have represented, but because we have a record of his conversation. And with who? The one who really matters. With the other president, Zelensky. And this is what he says. He says, Rudy very much knows what's happening. And he is a very capable guy. This is after he says he wants a favor. And he goes into CrowdStrike in 2016. He says, Rudy very much knows what's happening and is a very capable guy. If you could speak to him, that would be great. The former ambassador from the United States, the woman was bad news. And the people she was dealing with in Ukraine were bad news. So I just want to let you know that. The other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General, that would be great. Biden went about bragging that he stopped the prosecution. So if you could look into it, it sounds horrible to me. So what's in the President's mind when he has placed this otherwise inexplicable hold on the aid, when he refuses to take the meeting? What's on his mind? Biden. He makes that abundantly clear. I understand, Ambassador, you said you didn't make the connection between Burisma and Biden. I will let the American people judge the credibility of that answer. But there's no mistaking what Donald Trump's interest was. There's no mistaking about what Donald Trump meant when he had that call with you on an unsecure phone as you're sitting there, an outdoor terrace in Ukraine. When the President said investigation, he meant Biden. He made that abundantly clear to the President of Ukraine the day before. The question is not what the President meant. The question is not whether he was responsible for holding up the aid. He was. The question is not whether everybody knew it. Apparently they did. The question is, what are we prepared to do about it? Is there any accountability? Or are we forced to conclude that this is just now the world that we live in, when a president of the United States can withhold vital military aid from an ally at war with the Russians, an ally fighting our fight too, to defend our country against Russian aggression? Are we prepared to say, in the words of Mick Mulvaney, get over it or get used to it. We're not prepared to say that. We're not prepared to say that. And I appreciate Ambassador Ambassador Sondland, I appreciate the fact that you have not opined on whether the president should be impeached or not be impeached, or whether the crime of bribery or the impeachable offense of bribery or other high crimes and misdemeanors has been committed. That is for us to decide in consultation with our constituents and our conscience. That is for us to decide. And much as my colleagues have said otherwise, this is not an easy decision for any of us. And much as my colleagues may say otherwise, this is not something we relish. For over a year, I resisted this whole idea of going down the road to impeachment. But it was made necessary, and not by the whistleblower, but by the actions of the president. I'm continually struck how my colleagues would suggest that because the president got caught, we should ignore the fact that he was conditioning official acts in order to get political favors, in order to get an investigation against his rival. Getting caught is no defense, not to a violation of the Constitution or to a violation of his oath of office, and it certainly doesn't give us a reason to ignore our own oath of office. We are adjourned.
It is Thursday, the 21st of November of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, once we put ourselves in the bubble here at the mothership, at Netroots Radio, where we do produce West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, we also have to take into account the world as it's actually happening, and we have to put ourselves in a bubble. We can't take any more information because we have a curated show. We have these dishes all prepared for you. We can't just bring you out something raw. I mean, some people like that, but we like to prepare it and, let it stew, as we shall say. So, the Fiona Hill hearing, I call it the Fiona Hill hearing because there's also Holmes, I believe it's David Holmes, is also testifying. But I was able to take in the opening statements of Committee Chair Adam Schiff, Ranking Member, Russian Asset, Devin Nunes. Devin Nunes was casting Russian agitprop from the dais of the House Intel Committee. Every single nation in the world, our allies, all of our intel and law enforcement, federal law enforcement organizations, all pointed the finger at Russia meddling in the election in 2016. That's not saying that, China did something or even Iran tried to do something. My God. And we have a story about Devin Nunes being a little bit too implicated in all this. I would say that there is a Russian plant right now sitting in the House Intel Committee ranking chair. This is not hyperbole. What he was doing was not just muddying the waters, he was promoting Russian agitprop. Propaganda. Brainwashing. And I have to say, I never watched The Apprentice. So whatever thing that they had that tickled the lizard brain part of people who watched it. But when I have been subjected to those frequencies they might put out, I don't know what it is. It doesn't work. So I don't know if I count myself as lucky, but I also say you make your own luck. And I would not watch that trash. The same reason why I cannot watch Fox as, even part of a job. It appeals to a particular brand of mind. Yes, it's a brand. They do studies on it. They do. Though it be small, yes, in terms of percentages. Raw numbers, there's quite a bit. Let's be clear, millions. Lots of millions. But they all know what Devin Nunes was talking about. They believe it to be true. Because they've been told it, not just since Trump took office. Liberal is a pejorative. Democrat, a pejorative. Social justice warrior, pejorative. Anything that is good that promotes community and compromise among neighbors, and dare I say, even loving thy neighbor, is considered a pejorative. Well, Adam Schiff's closing statement, that was another one for the ages. And I will say that his opening statement for today, what I was able to see, was one for the ages as well. And Devin Nunes will go down in history not being a Benedict Arnold. But he might be worse than Robert Hansen. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, despite multiple threats, Border Patrol is preventing doctors from administrating free vaccines and medical care to detained refugees. They're not getting any medical care. These groups of doctors have offered it for free, and Border Patrol says, nah, cruelty is the point. The Supreme Court is set to criminalize immigrant advocacy, routine legal work, and even sympathetic tweets for refugees because Stephen Mueller hates black and brown people. And indicted Giuliani associate Lev Parnas arranged meetings in Europe in 2018 for Devin Nunes to obstruct the Mueller probe. Yeah, we're going to go there. After the break, we will move then to the chef's table, where Turkey arrested a lawyer hired by the German embassy, heightening tensions between the NATO partners. And they've been simmering for a bit of time now, indeed. And in a bid to prevent it from being a pilgrimage site for neo-Nazis, Austria will turn Hitler's birthplace into a police station. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. We get into the more structured part of the salon here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I just want to say one more thing to Devin Nunes. He insists that this whole impeachment inquiry is tearing the country apart. It has made such a great divide, yada, 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 yada. I'll tell you what divides the country and can really tear it apart. How about icebox baby gulags? How about tearing little kids away from their parents and maybe putting them up in clandestine adoption operations? Is that a little bit too conspiracy-minded for your, brainwashed brain, Devin? You know, it takes a particular kind of pizzazz to go up on national television for the Congressional Record and spew this Russian agitprop for history. I guess he thinks that they're going to win. And I don't mean Trump winning this election. I'm talking about the complete destruction of America. What is the goal? We, on the side of democratic norms and understanding and protocols and, dare I say, laws, and their side upset that, I have to be a good neighbor. You can't force me to be a good neighbor. Of course we can't force you. But we can pretty much restrict you. You can be shunned. What a bunch of whiners. They whine so much that they have, I guess, decided to go with Vlad because he has such pizzazz. If you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page, you will notice the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will then notice the link to our Patreon page, and thank you to those of you who, over all these many years, have your generosity has allowed us to pay our bills. And that's a main component in keeping Resistance Radio resisting. Because you fly under the radar when you pay your bills. You can almost get away with it. And we have been for 8 years of 24/7, 365 broadcasting. And it was because of you and your generosity. And we thank you greatly. And to you, those of you who are new to the show and to the station, just a little bit, a few dollars. How about an espresso type coffee drink? That the cost of that sent our way once a month goes a long way to us, for us to be able to pay our bills and beyond, because there's always beyond. Nothing is a fixed cost anymore. Not ever. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. Just go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and so much more, and we thank Tom. And I take care of @Justice Putnam, and I would say go ahead, follow me there. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up onto social media for everybody's social media link pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. And you can pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. All right. I think the silent majority, for those of you who presumably don't know what the silent majority was, that was presumably out there the great mass of conservative America who really loved Richard Nixon. That they just never let their feelings known, and so, but once they raise their voices, these damn hippies and these damn commie hippie liberals will be put in their place once and for all. Unfortunately, who the silent majority was anything but a Nixon lover. For instance, when the silent majority, that great middle of America, got tired of their kids getting killed in Vietnam, they said, hey, F you. Sometimes in more polite terms, but it was essentially an F you. You kicked the bear, the sleeping giant. Yeah, you got to go all the way back to World War II to figure out what that one was about. But you kicked the sleeping giant, and you might suffer the consequences. Japan did. So that's what happened with old Tricky Dick. He kicked the sleeping giant, awoke the bear, and the bear of America said, yeah, I'm growling now. Stop it. So I actually believe that the silent majority is watching what is going on with these impeachment hearings and really has been taking in what's been going on since day one when they lied about the inauguration size. It started even then, and maybe even before, but regardless. People have been taking this in, and I think people are fed up. I guess I should get into what's on this first offering here, because it all ties in. Can't rant the whole show. Only part of it. So, the American Independent used to be Share Blue Media, and looks like Josh Israel brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A group of doctors is pressuring Customs and Border Protection officials to allow them to administer flu vaccines to families in immigration detention despite multiple deaths, but the agency has thus far refused offers for medical care. According to a report in the Los Angeles Times, 7 doctors offered to arrange volunteers to vaccinate kids and parents at Border Patrol holding facilities to prevent a flu epidemic. In letters to the Departments of Homeland Security and Health and Human Services, the doctors noted that the children in Border Patrol custody were 9 times more likely to die of the flu than the general population, and 3 youths died last year. While the doctors have not received a response, a spokesperson for the Border Patrol told the Times that it did not vaccinate in holding areas because they were intended to be temporary placements. We're only subjecting them to torture temporarily here. Temporary could be a couple of years, but it's not permanent. So you have to go to a permanent facility for that. And we don't allow anybody in the permanent facilities, even doctors, to vaccinate the flu because we need more bed space. And the only way to have more bed space is truly through attrition. You can't deport them all. No, when cruelty is the point, death is the result. I know it's in this reporter's opinion. I'm going off. Okay, as a law enforcement agency, and due to the short-term nature of Border Patrol holding and other logistical challenges, operating a vaccine program is not feasible, she said. They actually take over Walmart parking lots for a day and vaccinate thousands and thousands and thousands of people, even give them dental care and eye care, thousands and thousands and thousands of poor people in Walmart for free. I think the logistical challenge in your little cafeteria chain link fence area can accommodate a vaccination program for one day. How about that? Julia Sierra, one of the doctors offering to do the vaccinations, told the LA Times she had seen the flu spreading among migrant families in the San Diego area. It's putting people in a dangerous situation and increasing their risks of getting any disease, including the flu, she said, noting that once they get sick, the vaccines won't help them. Sierra said she attempted to help vaccinate patients in the San Isidro Border Patrol station near her clinic, but they won't let us in, she said. We've volunteered to take care of patients, to be on call. We keep trying to help. A spokesperson for the Border Patrol would not respond to a request for comment. Lorelei Laird of Slate brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Freedom of speech is one of the few issues that could be said to have bipartisan support at the Supreme Court. While the justices might differ as to what exactly counts as speech, money, for example, they agree that it takes a lot for the government to overcome First Amendment objections. Now the conservative justices have a chance to prove their commitment to that principle. The Supreme Court has agreed to take up United States versus Synnanang Smith this judicial term. A case that concerns a little-used provision of immigration law that forbids encouraging or inducing an alien to reside in the United States when the encourager knows that person has no legal status. Oh, you're not here legally? Well, why don't we try to see if we can get you legal? Apparently, they're going to hear that case and decide whether they want to put you in jail for trying to help somebody become an American resident. A resident of the United States. How dare you? Okay. The case seems straightforward enough. Immigration consultant Evelyn Synnanang Smith told her undocumented clients they could stay in the United States under a program she knew had ended. In other words, that was fraud. And the government ultimately convicted her for fraud. But that's not ever enough when you have Stephen Miller at the helm. The government also convicted her on the encouragement provision, which on its face appears to criminalize any pro-immigration speech. And that has the immigrant rights community worried that the court, with its recent record of unprecedented deference to Trump, which also means Stephen Miller on immigration matters, could greenlight the Trump Justice Department, Opus Dei Bilba, to criminalize routine legal work and political speech. Any advocate or lawyer now has to worry, given the government's position in this case, that this language may trigger criminal liability just for correctly advising a non-citizen. And that was Manny Vargas, senior counsel for the nonprofit Immigrant Defense Project in New York City. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals made short work of rejecting Smith's appeal on the fraud convictions, but reversed her encouragement convictions, finding that the government's interpretation of the statute criminalizes a large amount of constitutionally protected speech. In other words, I'm thinking that Gorsuch and Brett might consider that a technicality. Everything is turned over on a technicality. Writing for a 3-judge majority, Judge A. Wallace Tassima said the provision could send a social media user to prison for encouraging undocumented people to stay until the law is changed, or a lawyer for telling her client that she has fewer due process rights outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. In so ruling, he had the help of a great many amicus briefs from immigration advocacy groups, attorney groups, and First Amendment advocates, mostly arguing that the encouragement provision criminalizes protected political speech and routine legal work. Tashima's ruling dismissed claims from the federal government that the encouragement provision is not really a law against speech, but requires specific actions that facilitate the entry or presence of an undocumented person. That's not what the statute says, Tashima wrote. Indeed, he noted that the federal government already has prosecuted at least one person who advised the cleaning lady generally about immigration law in U.S. v. Henderson without any of the specific actions that the government said in Synnanang Smith were required. Now, nor may courts let an unconstitutional law stand merely because the government promises not to use it, Tashima said. Indeed, Henderson exemplifies why we cannot take the government's word for how it will enforce a broadly written statute, he wrote, and suggests that any would-be speaker who has thought twice about expressing her views on immigration was not being paranoid. Nevertheless, the government repeated its conduct, not speech argument in its petition for Supreme Court review. The appeal alone makes some advocates nervous. Woodruff Swan of the Daily Beast brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Lev Parnas, an indicted associate of Rudy Giuliani, helped arrange meetings and calls in Europe for Devin Nunes in 2018, Parnas's lawyer Ed McMahon told the Daily Beast. Nunes' aide Derek Harvey participated in the meetings, the lawyer said, which were arranged to help Nunes' investigative work, meaning he was there to muddy up the Mueller probe. Nunes is the top Republican on the House committee, of course we know that, handling the impeachment hearings where Parnas's name has repeatedly come up. Congressional records show Nunes traveled to Europe from November 30th to December 3rd of 2018. Three of his aides, Harvey, Scott Glabe, and George Pappas, traveled with him per the records. U.S. government funds paid for the group's 4-day trip cost over $63,000. The travel came as Nunes, in his role on the House Intel Committee, was working to investigate the origins of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian election meddling. In other words, to fix the lie that it was really not the Russians. It wasn't the Russians, and then they wrote this, I don't know, what did he call it earlier this morning? A 280-page report done by just the Republicans. And it proved that it wasn't just the Russians, it was everybody else, so we really can't do anything about it, so we won't. And he is sitting up there passing judgment while being implicated in the crime. Well, that's a problem. Because I dare say that maybe the whole of the Republican Party is implicated, and all you have to do is follow the rubles. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Terminator returns to form. In a season of reboots, it isn't quite accurate to classify Tim Miller's Terminator Dark Fate as one. Yet it isn't exactly a direct sequel either. This movie picks up where Terminator 2 ended. John and Sarah Connor have successfully warded off the threat of Skynet, but they haven't quite changed the future. Instead, another project has led to a rise of machines as well, and there's a full-scale war between them and humans in the future because, as Sarah wryly observes, humans seldom learn from their mistakes. The Terminator robots are still very real, and this time one has been sent back to kill a young Mexican woman, Danny Ramos, played by Natalia Reyes, who Sarah cynically points out is the new Sarah Connor. Sent back in time to protect her is Grace, a human-born soldier whose enhancements have made her into a cyborg. Grace has superhuman strength and abilities, but they come at a cost. Although Schwarzenegger is back as the T-800 with a surprising new identity and a human named Carl, Terminator Dark Fate is mainly concerned with the women. Combining sharp editing and some smart humor, it manages to be surprisingly relatable amidst the violence. As we see, time has not been terribly kind to Sarah. Without spoilers, she may have saved humankind from its fate, but it has taken a toll on her. We aren't surprised when she reveals to Grace that most of her time not battling Terminators is spent getting drunk to forget. While Linda Hamilton is as good as ever as Sarah Connor, it's Mackenzie Davis as Grace who is the real standout. Davis, best known for her TV work, is nothing short of amazing. Terminator Dark Fate, much like last year's Halloween, is an offering that gets its franchise back on track. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Babies are constantly surrounded by human language, always listening and processing. Eventually, they put sounds together to produce a daddy or a mama. But what is still elusive to neuroscientists is exactly how the brain works to put it all together. To begin to figure it out, a team of researchers turned to a frequent stand-in for human infants when it comes to language learning, the song-learning zebrafinch.
Well, we've known for about 70 years or so that songbirds learn their song by first forming a memory of their father's song or another adult song, and then they use that memory in order to guide their song learning.
Neuroscientist Todd Roberts from the UT Southwestern Medical Center in Texas.
It's been a long-term goal of the field to try to figure out how or where in the brain this memory is. This form of learning, this type of imitative learning that birds do, is very similar to the type of learning that we engage in on a regular basis. Particularly when we're young, we use this type of learning to guide our speech learning.
Roberts and his team had a hunch that the interface between sensory areas and motor areas in the brain was critical for this process, and they zeroed in on a group of brain cells called the NIF.
In order to really prove that we were on the right track and that we could identify these circuits, we thought that maybe we could go in and see if we can implant a false memory.
To do it, the researchers used a technique called optogenetics. First, they used a virus to cause the neurons in the bird's NIF to become sensitive to light. Then, using a tiny electrode as a flashlight, they activated the neurons. The length of each pulse of light corresponded with the amount of time the neurons would fire, and the bird's brains interpreted that time period as the length of each note. Soon enough, the birds began to practice the notes they had learned, even though they had never really heard the sounds in the first place. The songs that these birds began to sing wouldn't win them any prizes. But amazingly, the birds produced them in the correct social situations. The researchers say this is the first time anybody has pinpointed a part of the brain necessary for generating the sorts of memories needed to mimic sounds. The study was in the journal Science.
This line of research is going to help us start to identify where in the brain we encode memories of pertinent social experiences that we use to guide learning. And we know that there are several neurodevelopmental disorders in people that have really profound effects on this type of learning.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
There are few actions as consequential as the impeachment of the president. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that's what Representative Adam Schiff, chair of the House Intelligence Committee, said in his opening statement on the first day of the impeachment hearings. President Trump's supporters, in contrast, have characterized the impeachment process as an attempt to overrule or negate the results of the 2016 election. Let's look at the Constitution. Impeachment and the possibility of removal of a duly elected president from office was very much on the minds of the founders. We know this because the Constitution is chock full of references to impeachment, with provisions regarding where the trial is, the Senate, and who decides, the senators, not a jury, and what the vote must be, a two-thirds majority, and who presides, the Chief Justice, and what the penalty must be, removal from office, and what additional punishment is possible, a bar to further holding of office, and the grounds, treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, and the effect on other criminal prosecutions after the president leaves office, none, and who takes over after the removal, the vice president. So yes, this is indeed a very consequential action. But no, the founders did not view the process as overruling an election. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1831. That was the day that silk workers went on strike in Lyon, France. It was one of several strikes known as the Canut Revolts. Canut was a term used to describe Lyonnese silk workers. During this time, the textile industry was the main source of jobs in Lyon. Half of the working population of Lyon made their living at silk weaving. Silk was decentralized during this pre-industrial era. 1,000 plus bankers and traders controlled and financed the manufacturing and sale of silk goods. These manufacturers contracted 8,000 chief weaving craftsmen known as the Canuts. The craftsmen were paid for a specific order or by the piece. Canuts owned their own looms. These craftsmen in turn employed 30,000 apprentices. These workers were paid by the day and usually lived with their craftsmen employers. Women were also employed, but at a lesser salary. In 1831, a downturn in the economy caused a drop in silk prices and a lowering of workers' wages. As a result, workers tried to get a minimum price imposed on silk. When their demands were refused, the workers seized a local arsenal. The insurgents took over Lyon after a bloody battle with the local military. There were 600 casualties and 100 deaths. The French government sent in a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars with an army of 20,000 to restore order. Faced with this force, the workers gave in without any more bloodshed. Some workers were arrested, but eventually acquitted. The minimum price for silk was abolished, and the revolt unsuccessful. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Thursday brings the last publicly scheduled House Intelligence Committee hearing in the impeachment inquiry, for now anyway, with David Holmes and Fiona Hill at the witness table. After today, the House is gone until December 3rd. Holmes was a last-minute addition, an accidental witness, if you will. He's the guy who overheard the phone conversation between Donald Trump and EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland in that restaurant in Kyiv, as explained by Ambassador Bill Taylor in the first hearing last week. But it's Fiona Hill, Trump's former top Russia expert, who's expected to deliver another major blow to the president. She was Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman's supervisor, and she was succeeded in her position by Tim Morrison. Both Morrison and Vindman testified Tuesday. She's also a former senior U.S. intelligence official and Russia scholar and an author of a respected biography of Russian President Vladimir Putin. She's also a proxy for one of the people Democrats most want to testify, former National Security Advisor John Bolton. She reported to him directly. Wednesday was exhausting. There were 2 hearings in the House, during which 3 witnesses testified. In the first session, we heard from Ambassador Gordon Sondland, whose words grace the full-page headline in Thursday's New York Times, quote, "We followed the president's orders."
First, Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and I worked with Mr. Rudy Giuliani on Ukraine matters at the express direction of the President of the United States. We did not want to work with Mr. Giuliani. Simply put, we were playing the hand we were dealt. We all understood that if we refused to work with Mr. Giuliani, we would lose a very important opportunity to cement relations between the United States and Ukraine. So we followed the president's orders.
Sondland went further than that.
I know that members of this committee frequently frame these complicated issues in the form of a simple question. Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes. Mr. Giuliani conveyed to Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and others that President Trump wanted a public statement from President Zelensky committing to investigations of Burisma and the 2016 election. Mr. Giuliani expressed those requests directly to the Ukrainians, and Mr. Giuliani also expressed those requests directly to us. We all understood that these prerequisites for the White House call and the White House meeting reflected President Trump's desires and requirements. Everyone was in the loop. It was no secret. Everyone was informed via email on July 19th. Days before the presidential call.
The second hearing on Wednesday featured testimony from Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Laura Cooper and Undersecretary of State David Hale. Laura Cooper made news when she said that the Ukrainians were aware of the hold on the military aid by the administration on July 25th. She explained that, following her deposition, her staff told her that they had received 2 emails on July 25th in which the State Department said Ukraine was, quote, asking about security assistance. After the second hearing concluded, we had about an hour to regroup and get more popcorn ready for the 5th Democratic primary debate. There was one particularly painful moment for Joe Biden, who, by the way, was celebrating his 77th birthday. A moment that probably should end his campaign. Cory Booker was seizing a rare opportunity to speak when he chided the former vice president for his comments earlier in the week opposing the legalization of marijuana, stunningly suggesting it might be a gateway drug. Oy. Well, anyway, this happened.
I have a lot of respect for the vice president. He has sworn me into my office as a hero. This week I hear him literally say that I don't think we should legalize marijuana. I thought you might have been high when you said it.
I'm part of that Obama coalition. I come out of the black community in terms of my support. If you notice, I have more people supporting me in the black community that have announced for me because they know me. They know who I am. 3 former chairs of the Black Caucus, the only African-American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate, a whole range of people.
No,
my point is...
That's not true. The other one is here.
I said the first. I said the first African-American elected.
Obviously, Biden was referring to Carol Moseley Braun, who was the first black woman elected to the Senate, but not the only one. Senator Kamala Harris was standing footsteps away from him on the debate stage. The next debate is in Los Angeles on December 19th. In other news, because as Bernie Sanders said,
we can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time.
Representative Carolyn Maloney of New York formally won the gavel of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, becoming the first woman to chair the panel that is at the forefront of investigations into the Trump administration. Maloney succeeds the late, great Elijah Cummings. A divided House committee approved a proposal Wednesday to decriminalize and tax marijuana at the federal level, a vote that was simultaneously described as a momentous turning point in national cannabis policy and a hollow political gesture. The Judiciary Committee approved the proposal 24-10 after more than 2 hours of debate. But a united House came together to unanimously pass the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act on Wednesday. Chinese officials wasted no time in expressing their displeasure. See, if the bill were to become law, the U.S. would have to confirm annually that China was maintaining the freedom and protection of semi-autonomous Hong Kong. Yeah, that would be a problem right now, considering the ongoing protests there. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more, visit NicoleSandler.com, look around, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 29 degrees Fahrenheit. What the heck? We're expecting to have a high of, maybe around 60. Think of that. And then overnight lows in the mid to low 30s. Clear skies throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine. Winds will be light and variable. And sunny skies tomorrow with winds light and variable. Clear cold skies tonight. Pollen is none. Air quality index is good at 21 parts per million, and that daytime UV index has ticked up one measure up in the low range at 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.91 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles. And relative humidity is at, 70%. Okay. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 41 with haze. Paris is 50 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 56 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 27 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 40 degrees with a light rain. Hong Kong is 63 and fair. Tokyo is 51 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees fair with lots and lots and lots of smoke. San Francisco, California is 53 and sunny. And New York is 46 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Turkey has arrested a Turkish lawyer hired by the German embassy in Ankara A diplomat at the foreign ministry said, a measure that could further raise tensions between the NATO partners. Relations between the two countries have been strained over German criticism of Erdogan's crackdown on opponents after a failed coup in 2016 and Turkey's military offensive last month against Kurdish militia in Syria. We are intensively trying to find out what the accusations are and to lift the remand, said the German official, declining to be named. The detention is incomprehensible. The lawyer was arrested in mid-September, the official said. The lawyer had been hired by the German embassy to provide documents related to Turkish citizens who had applied for asylum in Germany. The number of Turks seeking asylum in Germany has risen since the 2016 failed coup that Erdogan says was planned by supporters of U.S.-based cleric Fethullah Gulen, who was deeply embedded in Turkey's institutions. Oh, really? That's what Erdogan said. Well, between January and October this year, some 9,500 Turks applied for asylum in Germany, up 8% from the same period last year, making Turks the third largest group of asylum seekers after Syrians and Iraqis.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
And ever more worker bees at Reuters bring us now the final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The house where Adolf Hitler was born will be turned into a police station, Austria's interior minister said, after years of debate over how best to prevent it from becoming a pilgrimage site for neo-Nazis. Having recently carried out a compulsory purchase of the house in Braunau am Inn, a town on the border with Germany, Austria will invite architects to submit plans for a redesign of the building. It will house the local police force's officers. The house's future use by the police should send an unmistakable signal that this building will never again evoke the memory of National Socialism, Interior Minister Wolfgang Peschorn said. Local resident Rotrat Stranger said the house still attracted plenty of attention. Before, on his birthday, on April 20th, lots of people used to come and light candles and place flowers. All of that stopped. Now people come to take pictures, and that guy's lived there for 53 years. Johann Wolf said he would prefer the house become a community center. We take care of disabled people. It would have been the best of the messages in light of the fact that these people were wiped out at the time to turn the birthplace into something which values human lives. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And let's hope that neo-Nazis don't have a pilgrimage site. Take it away. And we, of course, are going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, de manger jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.